Go. All right. Hi, I'm Eric Metzger. I am the director of the A-Life team at Hamilton County Developmental Disabilities in Cincinnati, Ohio, or Hamilton County in the United States of America. And I have three guests with me who I will introduce as we go along. But just for the ease, we have James Harley, we have Mason Bailey, and Amber Cowart, who are all wonderful folks that have joined me. And we hope to provide a really good session for folks on a segment of economic and social development. Because we think that it has been academically addressed so many times, we're going to do an organic version, a real people, human version. So we're going to be more casual in the way that we talk about the subject matter. And I have three experts here. And so we'll start with the fact of this. When we think about economic and social development, oftentimes we're talking about occupations and things that people do that bring value. But we're really not focused on the value itself. Oftentimes we're focused on competition to get the best person for a venue, to get the best piece in place or position in place. And we're not really looking at the full value of the human beings involved. And particularly if we don't go below the surface, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So as we talk about people in the margins, people in the gaps, really the way the four of us see it is there are so many people that have so much value and so much to contribute, but they're immediately counted out without given any opportunity or even a second look to see, hey, what value do you bring and what value could you bring? And instead are oftentimes, too often, seen as takers, seen as burdens on society, which is just really not only a misnomer, but it actually creates the disparity that people face. So we'll be talking about this issue, and I'm going to start with Mr. James Harley. James, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll prompt you with a couple questions that I think will be helpful to people.
Okay, hi. My name is James Harley. I am an advocate rep the state of Ohio. I serve at Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services on the A-Life team. I'm also on the Ohio Task Force for People with Disabilities. I've been in advocacy for a pretty long time now, almost over 10 years. Throughout the time, I've served on many other committees also, such as Cincinnati USAD, that's the Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. I served on their CAC group. I was chair of that group. I've gotten many awards from the advocacy throughout the state of Ohio. I've served one time at the Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services Human Rights Committee, and I look forward to sharing more about me and my struggle and my disability today.
Okay, thanks, James. And James, let me start with you with a couple of questions. So beyond what you shared is you think about value and contribution, right? So when we look at you and I and the folks that we've known each other for some time and can easily see that value, you've shared with us before about those times when you haven't been looked upon as valuable or even really part of the fabric of citizenry or just human beings in general. So can you talk a little bit about when you've not been valued and you know how that felt, what it actually looked like, and what did you experience?
Yes, Eric. Though that throughout my life, first off, let me tell everybody what my disability is. I have cerebral palsy. That is a birth defect that's caused from the birth process. So I've lived my whole life with this disability, and throughout my life, I felt unvalued. I can go to many examples, such as in education, for example, though that I was segregated from a lot of my peers when I was in school. For instance, people with developmental disabilities are often put into special education classes, regardless of their ability and their cognitive function. I feel like that was a way of being devalued, um, as I was not worthy of 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 the proper education as other kids were. Also, throughout my employment um, life, though it's hard to find a job. And when I've had a job, I've had people say bad comments to me about, that you're just taking jobs away from somebody else that really needs them, that you really don't need it. because the state will take care of you. Though they pity me. They say things like dear or honey, stuff like that. Something that we want to never say. I walk up to somebody without a disability. So those are many things that are used to devalue people, and makes me feel devalued. You
So
know,
let me ask a question there, because it really brings up a great question. So people, whether it was through good intent or not, but even well-intentioned people often ask you to be of less value. In other words, when they say you don't need to work, you don't need to be part of this, they don't realize that they're actually devaluing you and actually inviting you to be valued less. Do I understand that right?
Yes, Eric. For example, I had a coworker at Walmart, and she was a very sweet lady. We got along real fine, and she probably, like you said, they're not really aware of what they're saying is actually hurtful. But she said, "Well, if I was you, because I worked full time at Walmart for a while, but she said if I was you, I wouldn't even worry about doing anything because the state would take care of you. You'll get health care and stuff like that. So if I was you, I wouldn't even stress myself out about." And then with that, I had to politely tell her it's not about that. It's about feeling value and make sure you're contributing to society. That a lot of people in the world just think that people with disabilities don't have any value inside society. And sadly, in so many countries around the world, that people with disabilities don't even have the rights that we have in the United States. They're automatically put in orphanages, or sometimes much worse. So that yeah, no, that's what I yeah, no. So people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, all the time they seem to always say things that is devaluing me as a human being instead of actually just treat me like everybody else. I want to be treated equally as everybody else. You know.
Okay, and let me ask this then. Let's talk about the flip side of that, because I know certainly a number of us here really value you and can't do without you. So let me ask you, when did you really experience if you can remember, like that first feeling, hey, I'm really being counted in here. This is really starting to work now. People are starting to see me. People are starting to really value me. Where you felt like, okay, now it's starting to work the way it should.
I'm actually going to say back in 2010 when I met John Romer and the advocacy team here. I feel like I had a voice on the advocacy team. I did because I was speaking out and people were listening to the issues that affect me. I wasn't just people wasn't just trying to shut me up or or just or please me of saying what I want to hear. I actually felt like that I was a part of something, a part of making a difference in people's lives with disabilities. So that I started feeling value when I joined the advocacy team some 10 years ago. You know, also I felt valued um, and I see. Also, I feel value. Um, um, and this is a different situation. I want to work at Walmart. Though I feel valued that when people actually um, treated me with dignity. I had a lot of good people that have dignity. They show up respect for me. They actually see my value. I've won employee of the month a couple times at Walmart for my positive attitude and stuff. That made me feel really valued. It did because it felt like that I was a regular. It felt like that I was part of the family like everybody else was, part of the Walmart family like everybody else.
And was
You
that
know,
true, James, of both the employees there? But I would, just knowing you, I know, well, I won't assume it. Was it also true of customers that saw you regularly?
yes, customers to Sony Deli, yes, they would walk up to me, yes, and one guy would just um um, come up to me and say, I really think this is very wonderful what you're doing, that you're working, you're getting out, you actually getting out and contribute. I think this is really wonderful to you. And he felt like he had to say that every time he see me because I was at the door. And, I guess that he was, I guess, I don't know if he meant well attended or not by it, but there's a little bit of devaluing a little bit because you don't have this, because you don't say that to any other worker as you come into the building, but you had to find, but you find me and say,
Yeah.
it's really wonderful what, like, I don't really want, like, like otherwise, that I don't really, as if people with disabilities don't want to have meaningful, gainful employment.
Right.
That's not the issue. The issue is a lot of times, like you said earlier, you know, the gaining employment is all about competition, and people see people with this, and employers see people with disabilities often as having as an extra burden to them with their payroll, and sometimes they worried about liabilities that may come with hiring somebody with a disability. So, but if we really, but if but if everything's fair and equal, I, I find it though that I think most people with disabilities would rather be contributing citizens in their communities instead, instead of instead of the state providing for them. Um, I I mean myself, I've talked to other people that have that same view, that just want the opportunity.
All right. I appreciate what you had to share, and we'll be coming back to you, James, because you've got such good insight. Mason Bailey, can you introduce yourself a little bit, and we'll get going with some questions for you in similar fashion.
Hi, I'm Mason Bailey. I'm a new member on Eric's new A Life team, and I'm here to answer your questions you have for me.
And I should probably say this: the A Life team, when we say that, stands for advocacy, life course planning, which is just what it sounds like. We sit down with families and people with disabilities and look at the long road of life, and we want to make sure that people are involved in life and don't fall off the track because they're experiencing medical concerns and hospitalizations and various things that happen to people. We want to keep people involved, and then inclusion, and finally family engagement. But we really are about human beings. That's what we do. And so I met Mason when Mason was 17 a few years ago. And when I met you, Mason, things weren't great, were they? I was asked to come talk to Mason a little bit about he wanted to do some things, but really was being counted out. So why don't you talk about that whole experience, Mason, and then we'll tell people where you ended up, because it's quite a story.
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I first met Eric because freshman year I thought it was a good idea to join the wrestling team with my high school because I have such tremendous upper body strength. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe we can modify a starting position. Well, my high school didn't agree with that. They thought it would look bad to have a person with a disability on their high school team competing. So I immediately didn't even get a chance to try out. It was kind of shut down right from the very beginning.
And let me ask this real quick, Mason, because people only see your upper body, which is very strong. But can you talk a little bit about your disability in a way that people can understand why that makes a difference?
So I have spastic diplegia cerebral palsy, which means I just have some spasticity, which like muscle spasms, so imbalance issues. So that means I walk with single tip canes, and I basically just do everything a normal human could do, but I walk with canes.
And for people that would see you for the first time, it's oftentimes difficult. People haven't seen people like you, have to use a lot of support, and you walk right in a way that people are always worried about what your ability to stay up, and that's why your upper body's so strong. But you've had how many operations?
17.
17 operations, and you're very young. So, I think it helps people. So you're not uncomfortable with it, but a whole lot of other people are uncomfortable with assuming that you're able. Instead, they assume you're what?
Disabled.
Right. So, okay. So you didn't make the wrestling team. People, you were kind of counted out there. Also, in terms of tell people what you wanted to do beyond wrestling. You were starting to think about a career at that time. And for folks that aren't part of our system, high school ends around 18 years old. You go on to what most people call university and or an occupation. So you started to think about a career, and what were you thinking about?
Right. I've been playing outside my whole life. Um, just doing yard maintenance. I owned a lawn care company for several years. So I just wanted to take that to the next level and be a heavy equipment operator, which a heavy equipment operator is basically what it sounds like. You see those big machines on the side of the road, and I said I want to be in that seat operating one of those.
And how
So
was that received?
not very well.
Okay. So did you have, it sounds like people not receiving it well. And so those were professionals saying what? What were they saying to you about that?
Well, our first IEP meeting, and you can vouch because you were sitting right next to me. The lady looks at me and she goes, "Mason, you know you have a physical disability, right?" And I'm thinking to myself, okay, is this what the 21 years of pain in the wheelchair is for? It just didn't go. It was kind of, they devalued me in the sense of they wanted me to fit into their box that they had for me instead of thinking outside the box to mold a job that I wanted to do because they
And I will say, I remember you saying to me, and as many professionals were involved, although they had good intention, they were assuming your disability, not your ability. And what you said to me was, you people keep asking me what I want and what I want to do and what are my interests, but nobody listens. Do you remember
right.
telling me that?
Yes,
Okay. And so what we did is we did some alternative planning, right, at your picnic table.
yes.
We said, you know, what if we started over? If it was just your family and no system existed, and how would you solve family problems? And you said, how would you? And you said, we usually sit at our picnic table and figure it out as a family. And that's what we did. And what did we come up with?
We came up with a whole schedule of step by step of how we were going to attack trying to find me a job. And that really put everything like, I'm very like, I can follow a system. So I can do steps, and that just led up to me being able to accomplish my goal of being a heavy equipment
All right,
operator.
so take us through that a little bit. How did you get there? So people don't know the end of the story. Why don't you tell the end of the story, what you ended up doing, and then let people know kind of how that happened? Because it's absolutely remarkable, actually.
Right. So near the end of this whole thing, Eric calls me. He's like, "Yo, I found a school near my house, which he lives 45 minutes away from me." And he's like, "I want you to go talk to the instructor." So I was like, "All right." So we set up a meeting with the instructor. His name was Dennis, and he basically, during that meeting, he basically said, "Why are you even here talking to me? I don't know why you think you're any different than anybody else." And that was the first time I really felt like, okay, I am just a regular person with dreams like everybody else. And so then I took all the classes needed for that, took all my tests with little to none modifications. I even built a ramp out of gravel with a machine to help me get in and out of the equipment better. So it was just finding the right people at the right time to give me an opportunity.
And I want to tell a story, Mason, because I've seen James do things like this, you know, and other folks, Amber, when you begin to add your own value to things. I remember in your first job, you got a job from a guy that was going to allow you to cut grass. And for other people that don't know that service, the main thing wasn't cutting grass, right? The main thing was like doing total landscape care and wood chips for people and planting trees and all of that. And so when you went there, he gave you a chance, and he said that he wasn't going to treat you like a person with disability. You needed to do the job, and he began to give you opportunities. And I say to the people watching that it is difficult to watch you get on equipment because you do worry that you're going to, you don't, but the rest of us worry you're going to fall off. But as you remind us, the machinery is not on when you're climbing up. You'll be okay. So you get on there, and then you began to do something. What would happen is the guys would pull in their trucks to get ready to take all their supplies out to places, and where they used to get their own materials. What did you start to figure out you could do for them?
I started loading material into their trucks before they got there in the morning so they could just turn the key and go wherever they needed to go.
And how happy were those guys?
They were very happy.
And it made the whole company more efficient, happy. They saw you added value that wasn't there before. And again, this is the whole point. We're not overemphasizing this, but that was your idea. You just started doing that. You were more industrious than people expected you to be. There wasn't a job for that. There wasn't a designation for that to happen. You did it.
No, nobody told me to do it. I just was the first one in and the last one out every morning. So I was the one kind of cleaning up everybody's mess that they made per se.
And then lastly, finish up with your last piece, your last job, which was really of all of them just was amazing. Talk about your last position.
My last position, I worked at a landfill, and that was really cool just to see how everything was recycled and how it helps our environment. But I got some really good seat time and pieces of equipment, and I learned how to excel my skills to
How
be
big was that equipment compared to like a car?
4 times the size of a car.
Yeah, that was giant. That's my word for it. It was giant. And so that was pretty cool. And all right. Well, so now you've traversed this from kind of a situation where you were really in despair and really felt devalued, and then you overcame. And believe, I just want to say to everybody that's listening, all that I did is clap for Mason. He came up with his own ideas and he and his family were so strong, and anybody could have done, pointed the way, because you were so strong in your conviction of what you could do. And so Mason, could you finish with, for those folks that don't have confidence, I mean, you had while you were really upset, you had a tremendous amount of, I'm going to do this one way or another, and so did your family. Do you have any advice for people that are really feeling like they can't do it, or just struggling with knowing how to start?
My best advice to anybody that's struggling is don't take no for an answer, because when a door closes, a window opens and you can go through the window. If a window closes, you can dig a hole and go underneath. So stick to the people that really support you, because those will be the people that guide you from point A to point B in your journey. Whether it was you or my mom, you were just giving me support with those bad jokes of yours. That
Exactly.
put a smile on my face and gave me the will to keep going.
So I was a cheerleader at best.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I didn't think I did anything, so I just wanted to make sure. All right. Okay. Amber, introduce yourself, and I think you know where we're going here, so I'll prompt you.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really enjoying listening to James and Mason. But yeah, I'm Amber Cowart. I'm a community navigator. I work on Eric Metzger's A Life team. I've been a part of his team almost 2 years now. I'm a licensed social worker. I'm a single mom, a dog owner, and a homeowner.
All right. So now you have a little twist to your story compared to James and Mason. While their stories are different from each other, you have a little different twist in that you started out as a staff person, as a social worker, serving people with disabilities, and then it took a turn where your life changed pretty radically. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Cincinnati, Hamilton County. I had a pretty, what you call, I guess, a normal childhood. I went to college, decided I wanted to be a social worker. I worked with many different populations, but I remembered an experience I had in high school where I was a peer chaperone and how much I enjoyed working with people who had disabilities. So I got to work at Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services, where I worked as at that time it was called a service facilitator, or what we know as a caseworker. And I was doing that for about a year when I all of a sudden broke my femur for no apparent reason. My femur just snapped in half. And I later got a cancer diagnosis. And I was in a wheelchair and then a walker. Now I'm primarily on a cane it's been about 4 years. 4 years on that walker, and then maybe about 6 years total that I've been living with a disability. So
Now, help us understand, just to make sure, because not everybody knows the skeletal system. The femur is what is located in what area?
so the femur is the strongest bone in the body, and it is in your leg. It's where your quadricep muscle. So mine was in my left leg.
Okay. And then the cancer was really serious. Talk a little bit
The
about
cancer was
whatever you're comfortable sharing.
sure. So I had, like Mason, I enjoy yard work. I love cutting grass. And this summer I was having really bad knee pain, but I just kind of ignored it, didn't pay much attention to it because I was cutting 2 yards that summer. I just figured, wear and tear on my body. I was in my early 30s. I was healthy. And one day just walking in the house, I fell, couldn't get up, and I went to the hospital and my femur had snapped in half. When they went in to repair my femur, my broken leg, it didn't look good to them, so they biopsied it. A couple weeks later, they came back and they told me I had something called rhabdomyosarcoma. And they were going to treat me at Children's Hospital because that was something primarily found in young boys. Maybe a month or so down the line, they re-diagnosed me with what's called undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma. So I had what's usually a muscle cancer, but mine was in my bone. It was very, very bad. I forget they don't stage it, but it was about maybe 4 centimeters, I think, large. And it was what they call, I forget the word for it, but more or less very strong, high grade. That's the word. It was a high grade cancer. So they were all set and really wanted to amputate my leg. I wasn't responding well to chemotherapy or any of that. And I was very depressed. I was in the bed all the time. I couldn't walk. They wouldn't let me walk, and I couldn't. I had about 4 surgeries. As soon as I was recovering from the surgery I had, which is called limb salvage, where instead of an amputation, they replace your bone in your knee with metal. I was a year recovering from that, still non-weight bearing, when I got an infection, and they had to take all of that stuff out, put in what they call a cement spacer. That's basically just a material to hold the form of the leg in the shape of a leg. While I received IV antibiotics for several months. Then they took that out, put in more metal, and I had to recover from that. So I had a virtual oncologist appointment last summer. So I've been in what they call surgical remission for a few years now. So.
Well, we're certainly glad of that. And so you told me a story that I'd like you to share with folks here, and that is that you were operating as this social worker. You're doing great stuff. You're motivated. Things are working. You've got great relationships with your professional colleagues and families and people. And then this happens, and certain perceptions start to change around value, around your value, the way people see your value and contributions. Can you share that?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, I had received education, higher education for social work. I had been in the field for some time. I loved what I did for a living. I thought I had a very high level of empathy for the people that I served. I was in my early 30s. I had just rented a house, really starting life there. And then this happened. And it just kind of rocked my world. So it never dawned on me going through life as I had done before, that once this happened, I was still pretty much the same person inside, but what I found was happening was I was not perceived as that person. So where I would normally go in a store and, just have the normal experiences I would always have, now that I presented differently physically, I was being treated differently. I would go in, Kroger's, for instance, and I would get totally ignored. It would either be one end of the spectrum where I was completely invisible to people, or they didn't want to even acknowledge that I existed because I looked different from them, or it'd be the complete opposite end where a complete stranger would pity me and try to hug me or kiss me. Um, so yeah, it was a total different experience than what I was used to. And I would go to places like physical therapy, and I would see folks who had all different abilities, like I had. But when I would go out in the world, I would wonder, where are all the people from PT? Where are the amputees that I saw in PT? Where are the people who use wheelchairs to get around? Things like that. Um, and it kind of changed my perception on as far as inclusion and integration.
So you come back, you heal, you come back to the field where you're serving people again, and does your value do you get to see your value return? Is it different? Help us understand what that transition kind of back into the world you left with these new glasses that you had on. How did that work?
Well, yeah, that transition was interesting. And it took a very long time. I was depressed for a very long time because I essentially wasn't the same to others. I lost a lot of close friendships, believe it or not. Some of my friendships were made stronger, but I did lose friends, relationships, romantic interests, things like that. And then once I decided, you know what, I can get around fairly well. I use a walker, but I can get around fairly well. I'm going to start applying for jobs. Going on those interviews was a unique experience because as a social worker, I would encourage people, oh yeah, you're totally qualified, you're hireable, go for it, don't give up, things of that nature. But what I found when I went on these interviews where you didn't just get those, requirement or qualification questions. You got looks and questions about your physical ability. We're on the second floor. You're able to get to the second floor, or you use both your hands to walk, or you're going to be able to carry the folders of the files you need, or like Mason said, I would have to explain to people, I get up the stairs a little bit differently than you, but I can get up the stairs. It's going to be uncomfortable for you to watch, but I can get up the stairs. So that was difficult, trying to get back in the work field. But then eventually, once I got my confidence up and I returned to the agency I worked for before I became ill, I started to look at things a little bit differently with the people that I served, because I had different experiences. So where before I thought I had a great amount of empathy, it kind of changed because now I had actually been in the shoes of the people that I served.
So if Mason and James were applying for a job now, what you would say to them now would be radically different, or at least different than what you would have said before you went through your trials.
Definitely. Advice that I would give would be radically different. Situations. There was a young man that I went and met with, and I saw that he was working. He lived by himself in an apartment. Before, I would have thought, man, this guy's life, is really good. He's got a job. He lives by himself. He's paying his own bills. But with these different lenses on, I saw that his life didn't really have that much purpose to him. He didn't know his neighbors. While he went to work, he didn't have any friendships at work. Nobody was calling him to hang out later. So things like that. I just started to look at things a little bit differently than I had before.
And I think that one of the things that together, as I address all of you together, a couple of things stand out in the last thing that you said, Amber, right? When we talk about economic and social development, we so often are thinking about, again, the product, right? The solution to becoming, part of. But the fact of the matter is, it's really the relationships that make a huge part of that, right? And so, because again, if you're only making a dollar, if you're only existing but you're not having social equity, social value, then life is just something to make it through. And again, it's it's almost like you're pretending to have value. You're getting assets. You're paying your bills, but what you're not doing is really living life, and you certainly aren't given the opportunity to contribute. Correct?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So let me ask now, here's the funny part about that, guys, and we'll say this because in the United Nations and in the US, we've had the American with Disabilities Act. And in the UN, there have been human rights and rights for people with disabilities for a long time that suggest that the kind of questions that you get, they're on the books. Those aren't the kind of questions you're supposed to be getting at occupations and opportunities, colleges, et cetera. But it sounds like, based on your stories, that those still exist in large numbers. Is that correct?
And I would just like to point out too, people don't realize the struggles we go through on a daily basis to like all the pain and all the different ways we have to do things. I can tell you a person with a disability is probably 10 times more creative than just an average person going to work, because we always have to adapt and overcome challenges that aren't there for everybody else. So unless they are in our shoes, it's inconvenient for them because we can't fill that position that they need.
So you're a problem solver
Yes.
at a rate greater than most people.
Yes.
So you drive a car. Tell folks what's unique about your car, Mason, that you bought with your own money.
Right. I bought a car and it's equipped with hand controls.
So
So
you
there's
use
just a little knob right below my left quad where it sits on my steering wheel, and I push in for brake and pull back for gas.
All right. See, that's awesome. And then James, as you think about that, you're very, we have all kinds of laws that are supposed to dictate to people how they treat you, but it sounds like that we still have a lot beyond the law. The law in and of itself isn't enough. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. Though that we can change laws, but until we change perspective, human minds, that we unfortunately we're going to continue to have a lot of problems that we have. We got to continue to change hearts and minds for people to actually see us as development, that we can change laws. For instance, the civil rights movement, we changed tons of laws, but unfortunately, that we didn't change a lot of hearts and minds in that movement. So that's what so we can change laws, but in the process, we need to change a person's hearts and minds about how the way they actually feel about people with disabilities.
Bingo.
So as we do this for other people, we experience. I want to wrap up with a couple of things. Have you say what you feel at this point is success? What are you feeling good about, right? But before we do that, let's go with what you said, James. What we're saying, I think, is it certainly in our country, in the United States, most of the laws are in place that need to be, but what they don't do is create opportunity. They don't create real opportunity on it. And so, as you said, winning the hearts and minds of people is the part. So, and as we wrap up, if one of each of you, and Mason, I'll start with you. Once you start with, if you were to say, what is it that folks like us that support people with disabilities, have disabilities, can do to cause others to feel it and to value who it is that we are?
Get out there and tell your story, not in a way where you want people to feel sorry for you, but in a way to inspire and change the standards and hearts and souls that people may look that on people with disabilities.
Whose mind have you changed, Mason? Anybody? You don't have to say their name, but is there somebody you can think of that now they see your value where they didn't before?
Yes.
Who is that? I mean, give a description. You know,
It was my high school principal.
Okay. All right. So he sees that you're just doing amazing things now. That's great. And I do too. And I just can't say enough about that. James, somebody's mind, and again, you don't have to say their name, but just somebody that maybe didn't see you in the right light before. Now they see this this amazing go-getter named James Harley?
Let's see. I would say my family, in general, though they see that because though there's a lot of people with disabilities, family doesn't really value them as they do other members of their family. So I
Yeah.
think my mom herself see now that I'm capable of speaking up for myself and advocating for other people. So I will say though that my family in general, they see me as a different person,
All right.
uh, now that I'm an advocate now.
Amber?
If it's okay, I'd like to go back to your original question
Yeah.
about how can we, touch people's hearts.
Yeah.
I have two little quick stories, one of which, so when I was growing up, I did not know anyone with a disability. I didn't know anything about that world. When I was in high school, went to Western Hills High School. Um, the boys and girls gym classes were separated, and all the kids who had a disability were in what's called the vocational building in the basement. And because the girls' gym class was not as competitive and intense, they had that classroom join our gym class. And through having gym class with the kids that were in the vocational building, I got to know a great number of people that had different kinds of abilities. And I made a couple friends. So that kind of exposed me, just getting to know them. When I worked for Hamilton County, right before I got sick, there was talk of closing down all the sheltered workshops. And I was not a fan of that. I thought that was not a good idea because many of those people, that was their whole life. All their friends were there. They had been, that was their income, and that was where they went every day. That's why they woke up every day, was to go there.
And just so people know, a sheltered workshop was what? Help describe it so people understand.
A shelter workshop is like a place or a warehouse where only people with disabilities work. A lot of time it's piece rate work where they're not really making a lot of money. And they kind of just hang out there more or less. Sometimes they're doing like assembly line type work. Other times it's like what's considered a day program where they go for recreation, but it's only people with disabilities there. So yeah, I wasn't a fan that they were going to close that. And only because that's where, their whole life was there. But like I was saying, once I got sick and I was out in the world, I started noticing I don't see anybody, with different abilities. Where are all the people that I go to PT with? Where are all the people that I used to serve when I worked for Hamilton County DD Services? So I really think the solution to that is inclusion. We should be seeing folks of all abilities everywhere. If it wasn't for my gym class being combined with those kids, I would not, still today not know anybody with a disability because they're not integrated in our society. So I think inclusion is a big piece. Yeah.
And it goes back to what I said earlier about the education of me growing up, that I grew up inside, it's a separated classroom, so that, the how it was seen differently, and then even like when I got to West High, because I went to West High also, and Amber, though they mainstreamed me out to some normal classes, and people used to just look at me like, oh my God, why is he with us? Something like that. But that I think though that because most of their childhoods and most of their time in school, they've not been integrated. I think if you start at a young age, and putting everybody together, that would easily change a lot of hearts and souls right then.
I agree. Yeah.
I also think too, like ending the stigma of like we're some sort of bad disease, and if we're seen with normal people that we're different from them. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We just have different ways of functioning.
Well, and it's something you guys may really think about too. We look at maybe your peers, right, and your classroom peers, your work peers, as having not been, you having been segregated from them. And what I would say when I listen to you talk, they've been segregated from you. Does that make sense? It's obvious that they're the same thing, but different perspective, right? Until I was included with people with disabilities, I had reason to be, I was ignorant. As Amber said, I didn't see people. And now people with disabilities, starting in 1988, are the reason that I have a great career. I'm able to support a family, have respect, except for my terrible jokes, and and those kinds of things, right? And so let's end with this. So I think what we're saying, if we were to encourage the world as we look at it, this seems really complicated. What do we do? I think hopefully we've uncomplicated and say, start with human beings, start with addressing a person to person. But I would say on a kind of a more of a macro level, on a big level, to say, if you're really interested in the development and the betterment of your communities in the world, in the same way that people go and look for resources, mine for resources in an ethical way, look at places where they can really get the best resources for their communities. What we're saying together, what we know from our experience, both on the inside and the outside, is if we would do that with people with disabilities, people would see that we can bring so much to the communities themselves, because what Mason, you shared, was we're problem solvers. We've overcome so many barriers. If I can solve a problem, what's good for me, and I'm saying it for you, Mason, what's good for Mason Bailey probably is good for a lot of people. What's good for James Harley, probably good for a lot of people. And Amber, the same for you. Let's add one more race. This is a big world issue right now. I just thought of a question that I want to throw in. Where does race and ethnicity and in gender equality fit in? If you have a disability and you're looking at those issues, does it play a part in that as well?
Yes, I think it plays a huge part in it.
Okay.
Because oftentimes people with disabilities, they are a part of other groups also. They're such as people with disabilities are also in the minority. I mean, look at me, I'm a minority. I'm African American, so issues that affect African American community also affect me also. And plus the fact that I have a developmental disability, so I'm getting double hammered from both sides, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then people for the LGBTQ, there's people in all spectrums from society, whether you have a disability or and so I think though that's important though that we include, because chances are if you belong to another marginalized group and you have a developmental disability, your life is almost 10 times harder as say a non-indigenous person without a disability.
Right. And that's true, because James, for this forum in the United States, indigenous folks have the highest level of disability among their population.
Yes.
Then Black folk do, then white folk, and then Latino, although we believe in respect to our Latino friends that actually that those statistics are not accurate. We think it's much higher. And so as we look at that, I think what we can conclude with, right, is that we ask that you look at the whole person. The lesson isn't only about people with disabilities. The lesson is inclusion, as Amber said, of the whole person. And when you do that, and when you really look at that person as a resource, regardless of what supports they may need up front, you're going to find a tremendous value. And if we stop looking at people in terms of clearly the numbers, how many people are employed, how many people do this or that, and look at what value can they bring to the table, much of that is social value, which then supports other people who are able to help us with some of the more mechanical kinds of things we need. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, last thoughts. Amber, I'll start with you. Any last thoughts to folks as we think about value and contribution?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I summed it up, I think.
Okay. Mason?
I mean, just keep pushing, following your dreams, and don't let anybody tell you no.
James?
Do it.
Though, as I tell people all the time, progress takes time. Don't get discouraged because there may be a setback. Throughout the history of this country, or really throughout the history of the world, any positive change has been met with resistance.
Yeah.
That we had to, and so the thing I want to stress to people, no matter where you are around the world, around the country, continue to fight for what you think what is right, for equality and justice for all people. regardless of disability, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Um, and just prepare for a long fight, but never give up.
It sounds like the downside of not being valued and the upside of being valued both are in play all the time, but it'll come if you keep working at it.
And
Yes.
I think we're all an example of that. We've all gone through everything we've gone through, and we're still here talking to you guys.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
So we'll finish with this. Mason Bailey is he is heavy equipment driver. He's met his dream. He drives a car, all of which he was not supposed to do. He has a great social life. He tells bad jokes with me. Our jokes are terrible quality, but well intended. And we have a great relationship. Mason also is a very sharp member of my advisory team. He tells me as a director whether or not they are good ideas and are good for people with disability. James Harley is on all kinds of important committees. He talks to people about Social Security and benefits and people and quality, and he's in high demand by anybody that meets him. And probably more important than that is he's got so much enthusiasm and can-do attitude, and he's just a really successful, and also on my advisory team. And Amber is, first of all, she's an amazing survivor and just shows people that, hey, you can be down and really climb up and make a new way, not only for herself, but other people, and is a super successful professional on my team, and also a leader in the Black women's community, and gives hope to, I think, young women as well as others that, hey, we care about disparity. We care about people in the margins. So we hope this has been valuable for everybody. And thank you so much for listening. And as people listen to this recording, if they have questions after, we'll entertain those through the format. And we appreciate everybody. Keep fighting and keep living well, folks.